Hello, paper florists, and thank you for joining us for the December 2020 Paper Flower Challenge. So as you can see, we're actually not doing a paper flower this time. I'm actually going to show you how to make these really cool winterberries and put them together in a small sprig or branch that you can use for your winter arrangements or Christmas wreath or however you choose to display them in your home. So these are actually fairly simple to do. It just takes a bit of time. So you have to be pretty patient to get this done, but I do hope to see tons of berries in our feed this month. It's a really fun project and one that you can do while you're watching TV, watching Christmas movies with your kids or something, you know. So it should be fun. So I'm going to move this over to the side and we'll get started. So the materials you're going to need for this are fairly minimal. So you'll need the paper or cotton spun balls, these little guys here. These right here are 8mm, but I've done a mix of 8 and 6mm balls for this. If you don't have these on hand or you don't want to wait for shipping for those, if you order them online, if you go to Michael's, they actually have this kind of foam snow filler that you can use for like ornaments or snow globe, you know, type pieces, things like that. Super cheap. It's like $3 and you get, you know, a bag of like 1,000 of these things. This will also work if you don't want to use the paper balls. So those wire pieces, I believe these are a 20 gauge or 22 gauge wire, cut into 4-inch lengths, brown floral tape, pliers, wire cutter, a black paint pen with a fairly fine tip on it, about like that, and then red acrylic paint mixed with a little bit of water, and then glossy Mod Podge also mixed with a little bit of water. Both of these are like a 2-to-1 ratio, so 2 parts paint to 1 part water, and then 2 parts Mod Podge to 1 part water. I find that it helps to coat it if it's not too thick when you go to dip the berry in, but I will show you that as we go along. So to get started here, I'm going to go ahead and grab my little spun cotton ball here. And as you can see, there's a little hole on one side of the ball. So what I'm going to do is actually take my hot glue gun, and this is the little fine tip Sure Bonder, which fits in really well into these little holes. So you can kind of put it up to the hole. Sometimes you can fit it all the way in and then fill that hole with some hot glue. And then you'll take your wire and just stick that right in and hold that until it cools. So I'm going to do that a couple more times. If the hole on the ball is fairly large, like this one, what you can do is actually bend the wire over on itself like that. You've seen that done tons of times, so I'm not gonna necessarily show you how to do that, but you just take your pliers and bend it over and scrunch it down so you have more surface area for the glue to grab a hold of. So again, you'll just take the glue gun tip, kind of put it right at the end of the hole here, fill that hole with a bit of hot glue. Just be very careful not to burn your fingers, and stick the wire in. Like that. And I got glue strings all over myself and the ball, so we'll take care of that later. All right. And then one more time. I'm gonna take the ball, the hot glue, maybe too much there. If it is, we can just kind of scrape that off. All right, and then just stick the wire right in. Yeah, there's a little bit of a glob there, so I'm just gonna take my finger and wipe that off. At this point, it's not like super hot, so it's not gonna burn me. And there we go. Now you've got those glued. All right, so I'm gonna set that one aside. I'm gonna go back to the first one that I did, which is this guy here. I think, yeah. All right, so I'm gonna take this guy and I'm gonna grab my paint, and I'm actually just going to dip the berry right in. If you're doing a lot of these, you wanna get a lot of paint in your bowl. And these little glass bowls I got at the dollar store, so they came in a little set of 4. So yeah, you just want to dip it enough to get it coated, and then just kind of run the berry along the side of the bowl to get rid of the excess paint, because otherwise it'll get really drippy and super messy. So just kind of roll that on the side of the bowl to get rid of any of the excess paint. And then you're going to stick that into a block of foam to dry. And you can see I've got a bunch here that I've already done and Mod Podged. So yeah, we'll do these for the other 2 here. So again, just kind of dip until it gets covered. You can kind of tip the bowl if you don't have enough in there. And you want to get it to where the paint covers over the hole of the ball, right where the wire meets up with the ball. You can dip a little bit further in, but I try to keep the stem or the wire on this as brown as possible. This is a brown paper covered wire, which I think fits a little bit better with the branch, since we are using a brown floral tape. All right, so got that. Took the excess off. I'm gonna stick that over here in my foam and let that dry. And then we're gonna do this one last one here. Again, just dipping until it's completely covered, and then get the excess off. Now, if you have some gloss acrylic red paint, you could absolutely do that and have it just be a single step. You don't have to do the Mod Podge, but the paint that I have on hand is just like a incredibly matte red color. So I wanted mine shiny, so I used the Mod Podge to make them shiny. But you can absolutely do a gloss paint if you wanted to cut down on your time on doing these. All right, so we're gonna actually let these berries sit and dry for a good 15 to 20 minutes before we dip them into the Mod Podge. So I'm gonna take a break really quick and then we'll get back to it. All right, so we are back and my paint is dry on these 3 little guys here. So I'm gonna go ahead and dip them into Mod Podge and we'll stick them back in the foam so they can dry. The rest of these are already dry, so we'll just keep on trucking with these guys. So I'm gonna go ahead and just show you again how to dip. So you're just gonna take your bowl of Mod Podge and your berry, just dip that straight down in it, twirl it around, make sure it gets good and coated. Wipe off the excess on the side of the bowl. Make sure it's not super drippy. And then if you look here, there's a couple of air bubbles. You can actually just kind of smash those up against the side of the bowl as well, and that'll get rid of those. And then you just stick it right back in the foam, let that dry. Same thing, take this, dip it in, make sure it gets really good and coated, and then wipe off the excess. And then again, if you've got any bubbles, you can kind of smush those out on the side of the bowl as well. Stick that down into the foam for it to dry. And one more time. Just dip it in Make sure it gets really good and coated, and then smooth the excess off. And it really doesn't take much on here to get these covered with the Mod Podge to get them to be shiny. So just dip that in there and then stick it right in the foam and let that dry. So we'll let these kind of chill out here while we keep going. I'm going to move this out of the way. All right, so if you look at the branch again, you'll see that, well, maybe you can. I'm going to adjust my light here so hopefully you can see a little bit better. So on these berries, there's a little black dot on the end of each of these berries. So I'm going to show you how to do that really quick. It's a completely optional detail. You don't have to do that, but I do feel like it brings the eye in a little closer so you can actually catch that detail, and it is botanically accurate for them to have these little dots on the bottom. So to do that, I'm actually going to grab my Craft Smart paint pen that I got at Michael's. You can also probably use a Sharpie, as long as it's a permanent type of marker. That's what you really need to get it to stay on the Mod Podge once it's all dry. So I'm actually going to grab a piece of paper here. There we go. All right, and so since this is a paint pen, it's got the paint inside of it. You got to shake it up a little bit. So I'm going to do that right now, just to get the paint all mixed up. And like I showed you in the last tutorial that we did with these paint markers, is that you do have to push the tip in for it to prime the paint and actually get it to come out of the tip. So I'm going to do that. I'm actually going to take my tip and push that in a couple times just to make sure that there's paint flowing out, which it is. Great. All right. Roll that a little bit. So this marker is actually a little old, so the tip on it is kind of starting to come apart. So I'm going to roll that back together so I get a good solid tip. And then move this over, bring my foam block into view. Hopefully you'll be able to see this easily. But normally what I'll do is I'll basically take my paint marker and hold it vertically just like this and just tap the top of each of the balls. So I'm going to try to do that. I'm going to hold the marker at a bit of an angle because my phone camera is so close, so I'm going to bump it if I do straight up and down, but we're going to try it and see if that will work. I'm simply going to scooch that over just a little bit. Okay, so I'm gonna hold this still, and I'm just going to kind of go through, and it doesn't have to be exactly like on the very top of the berry. Like if you're off by a little bit, it's fine. We're going to be bending the wires, so even if it's off by a little bit, you're not going to notice. So basically I'm just going through and just tapping the top of each of these little berries just to get a little black dot on the top. Let's get that over. And there's the last one. Okay. And if you find that on some of them the dots are too small, you can always go back and kind of tap it a couple more times to make them bigger. So that's really all there is to it for making the berry. So I do see with this one, I kind of double tapped it and it's got this weird kind of oblong thing. So I'm going to try to fix that really quick. While it's still wet, sometimes you can kind of scrape the paint off with your finger just a little bit to get off any little whoopsies that you do. Okay, So that's a little bit better. All right, so just kind of leave those to dry. Oh, and I meant to mention that the ones that we just Mod Podged, I will probably let sit overnight just to make sure that the paper is really, really good and dry with both the paint and the Mod Podge on it before we do anything else with it, before we put the dots on, before we do any more work with it. Because otherwise the Mod Podge will want to like try to stick to itself. So once you start clustering your berries together, you want to make sure they're not gonna get stuck together. All right, so I'm gonna set these over to the side so we can let them dry. The black dots are not going to take very long to dry at all, so maybe 10-15 minutes on those. But we're just going to keep on moving because I have a whole bunch that are already ready to go. Like I said, I made a ton of these for the tutorial and a personal project that I'm working on, so there's a lot. So I'm actually just going to pull these out, kind of separate them out a little bit. And then the rest of this is really just bundling them together and building the branch out. So since I have a difference in size, so like you can see this one is a 6mm and this is an 8. So putting those together gives it really good visual interest. So I'm gonna try to go through and group up some of these so I kind of have an idea of how many large ones I have, how many small ones I have, and how I can kind of cluster those together as we're building the branch out. And I'll kind of do that as we're going along. All right, so to start off the branch, I'm gonna grab some floral tape. And this is probably maybe about a foot long piece of floral tape in brown. And I'm gonna actually just grab 3 of these berries and put them together. I'm actually gonna bend the wires out just a little bit so they'll kind of fit together a little bit better. So the berries stick out, but the stems still touch, right? Just like that. And one of them can be a little bit higher, one can be a little bit lower. It doesn't really matter for this first cluster, but I do want to have 3 of them to start like that. So if you have not used floral tape or you don't really know how to use floral tape, this is a really good one to get practice with. So to use floral tape, once you pull it off, you'll notice that it's not really sticky. But basically what it is it's a very fine kind of crepe paper almost with wax. So what happens is when you stretch it and when you start working with your fingers, it warms up and it activates the wax and makes it sticky. So you'll stretch it out just a little bit to start and then start wrapping it up. So I'm gonna get it close to the top of where these berries are touching, so about right there, and then start wrapping it up. It is a little bit difficult to start, but once you actually get it stuck to itself, it'll go pretty quickly. And I'm just going to keep kind of stretching and wrapping as we go. And I'm going to go down probably a good 1.5 to 2 inches on this part just to get those together. And I'm going to pull that off. Okay. And then from there, I'm actually going to start pulling the wires apart at the bottom again so I can trim them down some. So the thing with this one, as you're building your branch, because we're not adding any extra wire to build the branch up, it is only going to be the berries that are going to put the branch together and build it out. But the more wires you add, it's going to get thicker, right? So to kind of combat that, what you can do is start trimming your wires down at different levels so it'll start to taper. So as you're adding more and more wires to it, it's not going to have that bulk, and you can kind of keep a fairly uniform thickness as you go all the way down. So if you see here, I'm pull these separate as you can see. So I have these 3 wires now at different levels, and we're going to keep doing that as we go along, as we add more wires. All right, so the next one, we're actually just going to grab maybe 4 berries in the next cluster here. And here's the thing with this. With the way that these attach to the branch, at this point, now that you've done the first little bit, with them being clustered like this, as you go down, the berries are going to come straight out of the branch, kind of like this. You see that? So you'll want to bend your wire so that way the stem will match up as you go down. So I'm going to take my pliers here. I'm just going to bend at like a 90-degree angle, and you can vary the amount of space that you have in this bend. You can either bend it right up against the berry, or you can use your pliers and you can, add a little bit of space there. You can add a lot of space there. So that way you have the berries coming out at different levels as you go down. So like for instance with this one, I'm going to have it come out a little bit more. So I'm going to go further down on my pliers so I actually have more space, and then I'm going to start bending it. So you have one that comes out a little bit further, and then this one, I want it just like right at the berry. So I'm just going to, with my fingers, bend that down so it's super close to the berry, and there's not a whole lot of space coming from the branch to the berry. And then this last one, we'll do kind of just the very tip of the pliers and then bend it. So there's just a little bit of space there. All right, and then there you have a piece there. Okay, so then I'm going to grab my floral tape again, stretch out the first, couple inches, and grab one of my berries and figure out where I want to place it. Now, here's the thing with building this out is you want there to be spacing between your clusters. If you go all the way down and cover the whole thing with berries, it's not going to look accurate. It's not going to look realistic. And, at that point, it's going to look like, okay, well, you could have gotten this at a craft store and not spent hours working on it. Which is kind of the whole point of making this, right? You want to make it look as accurate to the real thing as possible. So this one I just kind of wrapped around once, and then I'm going to add another one. I'm going to grab this small one here and kind of put it right next to it, just like that. And I'm going to come around. Actually, I'll move it up just a little bit. Come around with my floral tape. Wrap that around again, and then go down just a little bit, and then put my next one in. So this is the one that comes out a little bit further. So put that down, wrap that around, cut back around one more time, and then we'll add this other one right here. And you can kind of play with this as you go along, kind of get them positioned exactly how you want. So you can kind of bend the wires down a little bit or bend them up if you want to. So that way you can get them exactly how you want them. And then you just kind of go down just a little bit more. And then obviously this side is empty, so we're going to add a few more there. So I'm going to bend this over. This time I'm going to do just a cluster of 3, I think. And there really is no like strategy to this. It's just kind of looking at what you have and looking at where things are placed and figuring out where you want them to go. So I'm going to put 2 on this time at the same time. I'll line these up here. And they're going to be a little bit further down from the previous cluster. And then I'm going to wrap that around. And I'm making sure that it's on the opposite side, like that. Basically, you want it to be covered in a full like 360-degree coverage. All right, and then do one final berry and wrap that around. And then we can go down for a little bit and just keep wrapping. Okay. So this is almost to the thickness that I want it to be consistently throughout. So when I start adding more wires, I'm going to start trimming again. So for this, I'm actually going to grab this and kind of pull them out. And again, just kind of start cutting them off at different lengths. And again, there's really like no strategy with this. You just want to make sure that you have enough taken off of each wire so that way you get kind of a nice taper as you go down. So you can see how that kind of tapers down like that. All right, and then we're just going to keep going with this. So again, you're just going to take your berries, bend the wire, and I try to keep them bent at a 90-degree angle to start, and then you can always increase or decrease the angle as you go, you know, depending on how you want them clustered up. Now you can do the bending of the wires completely ahead of time, or you can kind of do it as you do each cluster. It's really up to you how you want to strategize at that bit of it. So I'm going to do a handful here really quick just to kind of speed things along some. And you can kind of see on some of these that the wire coat covering is starting to come, or the paper covering is starting to come off of the wires a little bit. And that's just from shoving them into foam. Since we're wrapping everything, it doesn't really matter all that much that that paper's coming off, because it's either going to get cut off or it's going to get covered up. So I'm not stressing about that paper coming loose at all. Okay, so we've got a decent amount bent there. So we can pretty well just keep on going with this. All right, so again, you know, kind of eyeball where you're at, see how your spacing is. I think I want to put a grouping right here. I'll pull my tape back just a little bit so we can start on that. And I'm going to put one of the larger berries here. Do a single wrap around, make sure that's good and on there, and then I'm going to grab one of my smaller berries and then put that kind of down next to it. And then wrap that around. And I may just do a cluster of 2 there. And then just keep going a little bit further down, wrap it a few times so we get some good spacing there. And then let's add a few more on this side. One of the things that's really interesting with working with the spun cotton balls is that they are not, you know, consistently spherical. You know, so some of them have little bumps and divots and, you know, little imperfections. And I actually think that lends really well to these berries because those berries are not perfect. A lot of them are kind of bumpy, and the skins on the berries are, you know, wrinkled and things like that as they kind of age on the branch. So it does add a little bit to the realism of it to have those little imperfections. So I think that's really kind of a lovely thing. So I'm just kind of going back through, figuring out where I want to put these berries, and then just adding them on. There's really no method to the madness here. It's just kind of looking at where you have empty spaces, where you want to put stuff, and then just putting it where you want it to go. So it is a little bit of something that does require some attention when you get to this point. But when you're painting and Mod Podging and all that, really you can kind of just do that on autopilot. And, you know, like I said before, you know, watch Christmas movies, or, you know, watch TV, whatever your favorite TV show is. All right, so we've got a few more wires on here. So I'm going to just keep that floral tape there and start pulling these out again and cutting them down. So this one, I'm actually going to cut right up to where the floral tape is. That's just the paper that was coming off of it, and then go down a little bit, trim that. Bit more, trim that down. Okay. So again, you can just double check your taper. I feel like that's still a lot of bulk right there, so I'm going to trim some of these down just a little bit more. And then just kind of keep adding more berries as you go along. You can have some little sprigs that are more sparse than others. You can have some that are really clustered down. Just as long as you still have some spacing between the clusters of berries, it really doesn't matter all that much. How many berries you put on a specific stem or anything like that. So a lot of it's just really kind of free form and like what feels right to you. So there's a big empty spot here, so we're going to add some there. I think I'm going to do a big cluster there. There's a lot of space here. Okay, so for this one, you can kind of see there's, I already have the floral tape down pretty low here, but I'm going to move this. When I add this berry, I'm actually going to put it a little bit higher up, so it'll have some more coverage up here. So I think that's just a little too sparse up there. So I'm going to put that there and then just wrap my floral tape around to get it in position. And it'll stay just fine that way. We'll put one more small one. No, put a big one there. I change my mind a lot as I'm doing this about what I want to put where and why I want to put it there. So, all right, so we're going to put that one there. Just wrap that around and need to grab some more floral tape. Just finish that end off. There we go. Grab another, I don't know, 12 to 14-inch piece of floral tape here, and then stretch it out again. And then I'm going to add my 5th one in this cluster right there. And start wrapping again. I think that's about as long as I want to make this one. I'm eventually going to add all of these pieces together to this branch and make it really big for an arrangement that I'm putting it in. So I think that's about as long as I want to make this one. So I'm going to pull that off, and then I'm going to trim down the wires again, because what I'm going to do is actually make another sprig and then join those together to make a sprig with 2 offshoots on it. So you can do this, you can leave it like this and put that in, you know, a wreath or something like that. You know, once you get these wire pieces trimmed down, you can always go back and cover it with more floral tape, which is actually what I'm going to do right now. So you kind of have a pick that you can just kind of jab into a wreath without having to do a whole lot of extra work. Sometimes I pull my floral tape a little too tight and then it rips on me, which happens from time to time, but it's no biggie. You just keep going and add more to it. And there you go. So now it's all bound together and you kind of have this little pointy end that you can kind of stick down into something. And you can also go in with your pliers and shape it a little bit. So just kind of go in where there's no berries and kind of bend it however you like and shape it so it looks a little more branch-like. So you can kind of get this little like slight curve so it's not just a straight stick. So you do that. That's how you put that together. I think what I'll do is show how to put these all together, or at least put two of them together to make a branch bit. So I'm going to put together another one of these really quick off camera, and then I'm going to show you how to finish that out. All right, so I am back and I have another piece that I've done here. So we're going to actually attach these two together and make a little branch with those. So what I'm going to do here, actually I bent that a little bit further up than I really like. So I'm going to bend it back and then start bending that over just a little bit so we kind of get a Y shape. I'm going to do the same thing on this one as well. Just figure out how I want that to face. I think I'm going to go that way. And again, just kind of bend it down a little that way. And we can always go back and readjust. But I do like that. That's a little bit far. I can bend this back just a little bit more. Like that. So we kind of have a little bit of a V separation and it looks more branch-like. So what I'm going to do is actually wrap those with floral tape to get those bound together. So I'm going to grab, actually move those out of the way because those are not quite long enough. Grab a longer piece of floral tape. And wrap these again. Kind of join them up where I have them bent, so I've got a good joint there. And I've already stretched my floral tape so it's sticky. And I'm just going to wrap right here where those are wanting to meet up. I'm going to do that a few times, just right there at the base. And then what I'm going to do is actually kind of go up and around one of the branches, up and over, and kind of pull the tape through like that and wrap around, and then do the same thing again, and then this time wrap around the other one and just kind of pull through, and then wrap around maybe one more time. And that really just kind of gives that a nice transition where those two pieces meet together. And then I'm just going to keep going down with the floral tape until that's all coated and these pieces are completely put together. And with the tapering that we did on these wires earlier, even with the two sprigs put together like this, you still get a good tapered end that you can use as a pick for your wreath. So if you're using a grapevine wreath or even just like a faux pine wreath, you can just kind of stick that right in and it'll stay. So you can do that. Or since it is tapered like this, You do also kind of get a good transition if you were to add it to a larger branch. So if I wanted to like add that here, just bring that down a little bit further and add it here, I could do that, which I may end up doing later on, but I'm gonna play with this just a little bit and see if I like it. Maybe I can like bring that down just a little bit and add that somewhere onto my branch. Not entirely sure how I want to fit that together yet. Maybe something like that. Maybe I kind of bend it this way and then add it to one of the sides. Just like bring that down and extend that out like that. And you could always just make a ton more berries and add more to it to get that to build out to a nice full branch that you can use in a larger floral arrangement for the holidays, for like a centerpiece for your table or something like that. So there you go. So that's how you do a berry sprig for your winter berries. And hopefully that'll extend out past Christmas and throughout the rest of your winter season. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.